Oh, what is happening, everybody? We got the old Traxxas TRX4 Bronco sitting on the operating table, getting ready to install a set of Traxxas LED rock lights onto the vehicle today. Before we get started, everybody, let's just touch on a few bases here. I want to cover this base for the people who have their own DIY LED light kit in their vehicle and want to hook up some Traxxas LED rock lights on their vehicle. I'll tell you how you can do that, and we'll also explain how to do it with your normal Traxxas LED light kit. First, I'm just going to assume that most people already have a Traxxas LED light kit installed on their vehicle. Hooking up the Traxxas LED rock lights will be a piece of cake. It'll be nice and easy, and I'll even show you guys how to install an on-off switch in between the rock lights and the power supply, so you can turn those on and off separately without having to worry about taking off your body and plugging in those wires or unplugging them from the power supply. So I'll show you how to get that done. I'll also show you how to install a on-off switch between the power and the power supply itself for the main lights. That way you can toggle your main lights on and off, once again, without having to worry about taking the body off the vehicle and plugging the lights in or unplugging the lights. You can leave those plugged in all the time and just have a separate on-off switch to toggle them on and off. So let's get into it here real quick. Like I said, gonna try to cover all the bases here, so bear with me for talking fast. Let's talk about Traxxas LED lights. Traxxas LEDs run on a lower voltage than your standard LED lights. Most standard LED lights, such as the light bar or my bumper lights, they run on 6 volts of electricity. And the LED lights that come with the Traxxas kit run on 3 volts electricity at 0.5 amps. So 3 volts, half an amp. For the Traxxas LEDs and 6 volts for most normal systems. So what I have on my truck, everybody, is I have a light bar on the roof and I have got lights in the bumper. Those are running off of 6 volts on their own separate battery pack, which basically is one of these little 4AA battery packs, velcroed underneath the hood on a little light on a separate light switch to turn those on and off. So those are separate from the actual Traxxas LED light kit itself. For you do-it-yourselfers, the guys that have your own DIY LED light kit in your Bronco and you're running off of 6 volts of electricity and you want to hook up a set of these Traxxas LED rock lights into your vehicle, you can do that, everybody. Only thing that you're going to have to do is come up with your own power supply. You're going to need a new power supply, something that only puts out 3 volts of electricity. If you go ahead and put 6 volts of electricity to these lights, they're going to be bright as hell for a few seconds, and then they're not going to work on you, and you're going to have all kinds of problem, and you're going to be out your money. So you're better off knocking the voltage down to 3 volts before you hook up these lights. So talk about how you can do that. Basically, everybody, you can get one of these little 4AA battery packs, which is putting out, once again, 6 volts of electricity, 1.5 volts per battery. So 1.5 volts, 1.5 volts, 3 volts combined, 1.5, 1.5 again, another 3 volts, 6 volts total. If you want to knock this down to 3 volts, you're going to have to cut 2 of these batteries out of the loop. So you'll have to do a little bit of customizing, rewire one of these battery packs. That way you're only running on 2 AA batteries, which once again will knock that down to 3 volts. Put a little on-off switch in between the battery pack and the lights, and you'll be good to go. You'll have your own separate power supply and your own separate on-off switch to toggle those on and off. Back to the Traxxas LED light kits, everybody. And let's talk about Traxxas. Let's talk about their LED light kit. The basic LED light kit on the vehicle. This is a little bit of a bummer for everybody, and not just myself, I'm sure. And that's the fact that you can't toggle the lights on and off separately without taking the body off and physically unplugging the lights from the power supply. And that's just a real bummer for Traxxas to do something like that. It would have been very cheap and very easy for Traxxas just to include a simple on-off switch with their LED light kit. Why they didn't do that, who knows, guys and gals? I really don't know. It certainly can't be for the cost of a switch. I mean, if you're ordering these switches out of China, I'm sure you could get them for less than a nickel a piece if you're ordering them by the train load, so or by the boxcar load. So I'm sure it can't be cost related why they're not doing it. Otherwise, I really don't know why they're not including on-off switches with their light kit. I did install a separate on-off switch for my Traxxas LED lights, and I'm also going to install a separate on-off switch for those rock lights. That way we can have our lights on for the truck, and if we want our rock lights on, we can turn them on, and if we want them off, we can shut them off and still have our headlights on. So we're going to wire up our lights, our rock lights separately, with their own power, with their own on-off switch, and I'll show you how to wire up an on-off switch into your existing Traxxas LED light kit. So taking a look at the truck right now, everybody, I do have this turned on. or I do have it plugged in. It's not quite turned on here just yet. Taking a look at this inner fender real quick here. I have two light switches on the inside of this inner fender underneath the body. We'll take a peek at that here in a minute. One on the outside of the fender and one on the inside of the fender. Two light switches. One of the light switches, the one on the outside of the fender, closer to the body, is a smaller switch like this, where the knob is just barely protruding off the top of the switch. And then the second switch that is mounted further in on the fender on the inside has a larger knob, such as this one right here, which is sticking up quite a bit off the top of the switch, which makes it easier for indexing. I've got them laid out with a small switch on the outside and a fat switch on the inside. Easy to get to, and they're kind of stacked up like this, everybody. If I get the camera to focus, boop, they're kind of stacked up like this and stuck to the inside of the fender. Once again, easy indexing with a small switch on the outside of the vehicle, fatter switch on the inside. It's easy to differentiate between the two switches. So we'll take a peek at that, everybody. Easy to get to. Once again, get your finger in underneath the body. Simple to turn the truck on. There we go. We have our truck turned on. We have our switches right here on the inside of the fender. Right there is our first switch. That is for the Traxxas LED light kit on the vehicle itself. And then just beyond that is the fatter switch, which operates my LED light bar and my bumper lights. So two different switches, side by side, easy to index, easy to get to without taking your body off. Once again, we're going to install this Rock-Light kit, and I'm going to install the Rock-Light switch right back here on the inside of this back fender, so we can just stick our finger into the back fender to turn that on and off. So before we get to taking the body off on that, everybody, we'll go ahead here and take a peek at our rock lights. Once again, there is all 8 of our rock lights. We are getting 2 rock lights per tire. Includes some zip ties in there, part number 8026. Looking at the back, we've got our LED rock light kit TRX4, requires 8028 power supply. If you already have a Traxxas LED light kit in your vehicle, once again, it came with that power supply. If you don't want to custom fabricate your own power supply by cutting one of these down and wiring it up so you're only using 2 batteries, you can go out and buy a Traxxas power supply. Here it is, part number 8028. This is the separate power supply right here. This is a little junction block on the inside, which has several pins on the inside of here, so you can hook up 4 different lights into that junction block there. Looking at our wires coming off of it, we've got our one skinny Futaba style plug here that goes into the ESC, and the other one goes into the receiver. Receiver side's getting a single signal for the most part, and the other side is getting its power off of the ESC. So you could install one of these, and then you would have your 6 volts, or your 3 volts of electricity rather, 3 volts of electricity to power up your rock lights. Looking at the back of this, once again, part number 8028. Looking at the back, just to cover the bases one more time, LED lights, power supply regulated, 3 volts, 0.5 amps, TRX4 3-in-1 wire harness. So there you go, everybody, regulated down to 3 volts, 0.5 amps, just to let you know once again that all the Traxxas LED lights are running on 3 volts. So let's go ahead here, we'll pop the body off the truck and see what we're working with. Alright everybody, having the body off the truck, taking a quick peek here at our on-off switches that we've got installed. Kind of difficult to see, but we have our first switch right here on the outside of the fender. This is what operates our LED lights for the truck itself. Second switch over on the inside of the fender, the fatter switch, that is what is operating my bumper lights and my LED light bar. Once again, being powered off of a 4AA battery pack right there that is velcroed to the front of the truck. Running off of a little 2-way splitter here, which goes up to my light bar and the bumper lights. For hooking up this on-off switch, guys and gals, to your basic Traxxas LED light kit. Once again, LED light kit doesn't come with an on-off switch, but it's pretty easy to install one into the system just so you can turn your lights on and off. That's going to require a simple on-off switch, obviously, and then you're going to need a couple of these small connectors. I don't know exactly what these connectors are referred to as for their actual name. I refer to them as small Futaba connectors. Whether they are or not is a different story, but you're going to need a male one and a female version of these connectors. So you're going to need a male version and a female version. Easy to hook this up. Once again, your power supply is getting its power off of the ESC, so I simply unplugged the ESC from the power supply and interrupted it with a switch. So we have the power supply, ESC is going into the switch right here, and it's coming out of the switch and going back over to the power supply. So simply just interrupting the power between the ESC and the power supply. So that's all that little switch is doing. Very easy to install once again. Just got to plug it in on this end, disconnect the power supply from the ESC, and plug a switch in between it, and you're good to go. So on to the rock lights. This part is going to be super simple and easy to do. We're going to start our install right here on the back corner of the truck. Put our first set of lights in, move to our second set, over to the next corner, over to that side, over to this side, over to here, and then finishing off right here in this corner, everybody. Real easy to do. They have them laid out in a big loop. So we start here and finish there, which is also going to make it very easy for installing a light switch right here, going in between our LED lights and the power supply. So this next light switch is going to be going in between the lights themselves and the power supply themselves. So nice easy install on that, and we'll get started on it. Alright everybody, we've got our lights out of the package, a few extra zip ties laying there, courtesy of included BS. Taking a look at our instructions here, they're showing you the basic power module installation right there. Wiring it up to the ESC, wiring it up to the receiver, mounting location there behind the shift servo. I'm looking at all our basic instructions here, and they appear to be for a TRX4 Defender. And we are wiring up a TRX4 Bronco, and that, yes sir, that is a Defender body right there. But the principle still remains the same. We are starting right back here in the back right corner, or back left corner behind the driver's side, moving on around the back of the truck towards the front, and ending right in front of the driver. Same wiring harness, I believe, between both trucks. Probably just a slightly different layout. They're showing you the LED light bar harness right there. 3-in-1 connector, your high-low brightness connector, all that good nonsense. But we're going to go ahead here and do one on the Bronco, and since there's no real instructions for that, we'll just play it by ear. We're going to start out using a 2mm hex wrench, everyone, and we're going to start removing all of these Rock-Light covers. 2 bolts on that first cover here, another 2 screws on this second cover over here on the opposite side. All the rest of the covers only have 1 screw holding them down, holding the covers down, and then on the other side they just have a locator. So kind of interesting that they have 2 screws here on both sides, but only a single screw on all the rest. Don't know what that's all about, but we'll go ahead here and get started on the kit. We'll start by taking this little bread tie off, laying out our wiring harness, getting it all laid out, removing all those screws, and start to lay this in and see what she looks like. Alright, we have our basic light wiring harness here all laid out where we're starting at, working our way around the truck over to the finish. Definitely easier to lay it out on the vehicle itself versus laying it out on the table. We have all our light socket covers or light bucket covers removed. So we're going to go ahead here and start putting this baby on. Once again, starting at this back corner and working our way around. So we'll get a couple screws in here and then continue on. Alright everybody, we've got the basic layout in here. Started my first 2 right here with the wires on the inside. So the wires are on the inside of the vehicle, inside the chassis, less chance of any kinds of snags. Running the wiring harness across over to the other side, still haven't attached this side, basically just have them laid out in the location where they're supposed to be. Haven't located a spot to hide those wires as of yet. Just showing you guys the basic layout there for the system and how I have the wires all facing the inside of the vehicle. Looks like we have enough slack on this one up here to probably bring it up in and behind the servo, perhaps. We'll find out. So we're going to go ahead here and finish running the rest of these screws in and attaching the rest of the lights. Make sure, everyone, when you're installing these screws, don't over tighten these. You're just screwing into plastic, and very easy to strip out plastic threads, so no need to over tighten them. They're not really doing anything, they're just holding the lights in, so no real structural strength needed here. Just a little light tightening there will be fine. Make sure that you don't over tighten and strip anything out. So we're going to go ahead here, install the rest of these screws, and then we will start hiding some wires, and then move on to our next step, which will be either just plugging this directly into the power supply and having it on all the time, or leaving it unplugged when you want it unplugged and plugging it in when you want them on, or B, the route that we're going to go and wire this into an on-off switch so that we have a separate on-off switch over here on the side. That way when we're cruising around with our headlights on, we don't necessarily need our rock lights on, but when we do want the rock lights on, we can just reach our finger in here behind the fender and click those on into position. So we will go ahead and do that after we get the rest of this thing installed. So let's get started on it. And we're back again, everybody. Have all the lights currently installed on the truck. Everything is all screwed down. Hindsight 2020 on these back two lights right here. I removed those after the fact and rerouted the power wire right around this body post back here. So I'm going to use a small zip tie and loosely zip tie this power wire right behind the post. Just have it on there kind of loosely just to hold that in place. Pretty much the only good location for that wire. Anywhere along the bottom of the chassis here, if you were to try to route it along the bottom of the chassis, it's just going to be a snag point for something to come up through the bottom and grab a hold of that wire and rip it off. So in my opinion, this looked like the best location for it. Maybe not the neatest location as far as things look, but I think all in all that is probably going to be the best location to tie that wire down. Back along to the main power wire here running along the side of the chassis. Going into the instructions for the TRX4 Defender, they want you to run that right on down here, which would mean removing all of this stuff and running it right up along the side of the chassis right up here. So they want you to straight line that right along and down. In my opinion, that's probably not the best location for that, so I just ran ahead and hooked it up right here in this one wire connection on the back corner of the chassis. Ran it in between the shift servos for the transfer case, or for the front and rear differentials. And I'm basically using two zip ties here, and I'm zip tying that around my steering servo power wire right there, the wiring harness for the steering servo. So zip tying that around that wire just to hold this wire in check so it doesn't interfere with these guys, and the wire won't get snagged on anything. So I think that's going to be the best location. Have these loose at the moment. I'm going to snug those down a little bit. When it comes to this front wire stretching across the front, several different options here, everybody. Sorry about the camera angles. Looking at this, you could lay this flat inside the chassis and you know, maybe use some double-sided tape or something to hold that in if you wanted to. Really not too much room as far as mounting it back here. You could bring it down and use a zip tie to mount it directly to this post if you wanted to. That would be somewhat behind the steering servo, but there's not really enough wire here to go directly behind the steering servo and out the other side. Just draws it way too tight. So your options are kind of open there. You can pretty much do whatever you want with the wire. My case, I have a 4AA battery pack that sits right up here in the front, so I'm just going to run that wire right here in between the steering servo and that 4AA battery pack, and just have it kind of loosely wedged in between the two, holding it in place and somewhat camouflaging it. After that, we will get on to installing our on-off switch for the lights themselves. Back again, everyone. We have our wires loosely tied down. Have a little bit of movement right here. The zip tie is snug, but the wire is loose to slide back and forth in there, allowing some free movement if something accidentally snags it. Coming back around to the front, using the Bronco's existing wiring harness back here, or the hold down, tapped into that, and then use a couple zip ties, once again loosely wrapped around the steering servo wire, allowing some movement, but just mainly keeping it down, holding that wire down so it doesn't interfere with our differential shift servos. Coming back on up to this last front wire here, once again I ran that down in between my battery pack, which runs my bumper lights and my light bar on the roof of the truck. Ran that down in between the battery pack and the steering servo just to kind of get that out of the way, and once again no worries on anything about snagging that. Leading us back up to the front and on to our last little step, which is going to be installing a simple on-off switch in between our rock lights and the actual power supply. And we're back. Here we go, everybody, on to hooking up our on-off switch. Now there's a couple ways you can go about this. I'm going to tell you about the first way here, and I probably shouldn't tell you about the second way, but I'm going to go ahead and do that anyways. So looking at our on-off switch, everybody, just a basic cheap on-off switch. I believe this comes with a Futaba 3-wire style connector, only having 2 wires going into it. Same with the receiving end over here. a three wire style Futaba connector. I believe that is a Futaba connector with that little fin locator there, with only 2 wires going into it. And then looking at our smaller Traxxas connector, very small here, very small wires, blue positive, black negative right here. Obvious difference between the connectors. Our 3-prong Futaba style connector is definitely a little bit wider than our Traxxas connector. All right, so we have some obvious differences there. The best thing to do, everybody, in this situation is to figure out, number one, where you're going to locate your switch. I usually like to put my switch with the off position being up, on position being down, so it's easy just to turn your lights on, pushing down on the switch. And I would typically locate the switch right here on the inside of this inner fender, probably right in between this rib area here, so it's somewhat protected from the elements, easy to reach your finger in here and just flip that switch on. So basically you just want to measure, give yourself adequate distance or adequate wire length, maybe overlap a little bit here. If you were to cut these in, you know, cut this connector off right here, cut this other connector off, and solder it into the light switch. Making sure that you pay attention to your positive and negatives. Once again, blue being positive, black being negative, and red being positive on the switch, black being negative. So solder that into position, shrink wrap everything together, and then move on to the other side. Once again, paying attention to where your switch is, how much wire, excuse the camera here, and distances and whatnot, how much wire you're going to need to go from here into the power supply, into whatever plug slot you're going to go into. You have 4 little slots to choose from there, so whatever slot that you plan on using, make sure that you leave yourself enough adequate wire to make it to there. And then you would cut off your excess right here, and then solder in what's left of this little guy back into the on-off switch right there. That way you can plug it into the power supply. Let's talk about the wrong way to do this and another way that you could do this. All right, just for craps and giggles, everybody, looking at our 3-wire, 2-wire female connector here, looking at our Traxxas LED Rock-Light plug. Okay, once again, negative on the one side, or negative on the inside here being the black wire, positive being the blue wire. Looking at this, that wouldn't jive like plugging it in like this. Just wouldn't go together. Your wire wouldn't even be connected. But technically, you can plug this in just like this, which would be reversed now. So we have our negative going to our positive going to our negative, and our negative going to our positive. This will fit in here. You can push this in with a fine small screwdriver and shove it in a little bit further, so it makes excellent connection on the inside of there. That would be one way that you could connect it up right up to the switch without changing out any wires. And then once you made it down to the other end here, looking at this end, everybody, now you have to switch these 2 prongs around. You have your negative and your positive have been switched on the other side, so you need to switch it on this side in order to make everything jive right over here on our power supply. So one easy thing to do, if you're handy with the blade, everybody, and children, I do not recommend this, so you didn't see me tell you this, have your parents do this. It's very easy to cut yourself in this process, but you can use a X-Acto knife or a razor knife or a small pick of some sort. If I can get my camera to focus in on here, there are these little plastic tabs right down here on the back half of these plugs. You can simply, well, not very simply, but you can lift these tabs up, everybody. You can get a blade wedged in underneath them. You can lift those tabs up, and then you can pull these wires right out of the sockets. So then you can pull those wires out, switching them around, and then re-plugging them back in, putting your positive over here on the outside and your negative on the inside. Next step would be making this plug a little bit thinner so that it'll plug directly into our Traxxas power supply over here. And that would require a little bit of whittling, shaving this plug down. You'd have to shave quite a bit of material off the edge of this plug, just so you can narrow it down, get a little bit thinner so that it would slide into the power supply without a problem. So that is one way that you could get past it. If you technically didn't have any way of soldering things together, and you absolutely last resort needed to hook it up to your power supply, that is one way that you could do that. In my case, everybody, I'm going to measure out my wires and cut this end off and solder everything in place and do it the right way. But once again, if you wanted to hack it and slash it and piece it together, you could do that. You could plug this directly into here, making note that you are reversing your positive and negative wires. Over on this side, you're going to have to reverse it on this end, which once again you can do by lifting up these little plastic tabs right here on the edge of the connectors, and these wires will slide out. Switch them around and just simply pop them back into place, and then once again have your parents do this. You can whittle the side of the switch down to the point of where it will actually plug right into the power supply. So that is possible. Once again, we're going to solder it together and do it the right way. Alrighty, everybody, we are back. We have the switch in place, getting ready to solder things up here. Only have one wire connected at the moment, and that is mainly because the wires are just so darn fine. Don't want to risk having a bad connection, so doing them one at a time here just to make sure that we're wired up nice and good. For the people who decided to go that second method of trying to make the one plug fit into the other plug, and switching the prongs around on the other end of the plug down here, and taking a knife to this plug and hacking it down to size so that it'll actually fit into the power supply. If you decide to take that upon yourself, number one, that is your own responsibility. I'm not claiming anything on that, guys and gals, or little boys and girls. If you decide to take a knife and start carving on some electrical plugs to make them fit, and you accidentally slice your finger open or cut your finger off, that's your own fault. Just number one, have an adult do that, everybody. If you're under the age and shouldn't be handling a knife, especially doing something as complicated as switching these wires around and carving down that plug so it'll fit into that socket over here, make sure that you have an adult do that, or somebody who is definitely more than capable of working a blade and carving down a switch. So I sincerely hope you don't do that. But once again, if you decide to do that, that is all you guys. That is all on you, your responsibility. I've got nothing to do with it. Back to soldering, everybody. I think my soldering iron is just about warmed up by now. Gonna get that baby out here, throw a bead on that, and get underway. I'm wasting a lot of time and gas while talking. Hopefully you can see what's going on. Maybe you can't, I don't know. I'm gonna try not to burn my truck here in the process. Putting a little bit of solder on the iron just to moisten it up a little bit here. And then the rest of the time I'm going to have the soldering iron behind the wire, heating up to the point where it actually draws the solder through the wire. Holding it together. Hopefully I'm not hitting any plastic here. Once again, trying to do this on camera. Not really the best lighting here. A little bit too much solder on that wire. And that baby's going to be hot. And I'm trying to get it so you guys can see what's going on and I can see what's going on at the same time. And heat this up from the back side. Just try to pull some of that solder down into the rest of this wire. There we go. Probably gonna have some people yelling at me, "Oh, there's not the proper way of doing it, blah, 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 blah." Oh, she is melted right on through, and that is rock solid right there. So we're going to move on to the next wire. And there you go, everybody. We have everything soldered up here and shrink wrapped together on both ends. Only thing we need to do now is just mount our switch in place. Like, once again, I'm going to be putting it right in between these two grooves, keeping it somewhat elevated off of the chassis pan. That way if I'm out wheeling around in the snow in the winter time, a little bit of snow gets built up in here, put the truck off to the side to dry. Don't want any water settling in by these wires, or don't want these wires sitting in any puddles of water. So once again, just going to mount this vertically, just like this, and leaving it a little bit off the bottom of the chassis. That way there's no chance of any kind of water settlement right there. So I'll probably bring it right up around to the edge, right about in here. Get this stuck in place with a little bit of double-sided tape. Route our wires into position, and we will be all set with that part. And there you go, everyone. We have our switch installed. We have our excess slack kind of tucked away back here. We have our other little bit of excess slack tucked away back beyond here. So a little bit of extra wire here, making sure to leave a little bit of extra wire for making this connection. So we're all wired up, everyone. Taking a last look at the way we have everything kind of laid out here. Excuse the camera jerking around there, pulling my cord behind it. So there is our basic LED layout there for the rock lights. We'll go ahead, slap the body on it, and see how this all panned out. And here you go, everyone. Moment of truth. We've got the truck plugged in, turned on. Just a matter of turning on our main power for the lights, which is right here. So there we go. We have our headlights on, and then a matter of reaching in through the back fender here to access our switch for the rock lights, which is a little bit easier when you have the truck on the ground. But there you go. Bam, we have our rock lights hooked up and going. Shut our flash off, and that is that is lighting it up pretty good. I'm pretty impressed with that. That looks pretty decent. It's going to be interesting to see how it performs off-road at night and seeing what she looks like. Definitely looking pretty bright there. Throwing out some decent light. Pretty happy with that. Switch seems to work out pretty good. Nice easy access for getting in there and clicking that on and off. Pretty cool, not too shabby. And we still have our other lights, our other off-road lights up there on the roof, which are running off of that 6-volt system, hooked up separately on another switch, which is going from the bumper up to the light bar. So complete package all together right there. Not looking too bad. Cool. And there we go for our main lights there, and then we're going to go ahead and kill our rock lights here, bam, and then go ahead and shut off our master switch right up there, and we are back in the dark. And that is going to do it, everyone. Very much appreciated for y'all sticking around and watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you all on the next one. Thanks again.